UFC Vegas 57 is almost here. I'm going to give you my final picks. We're going to talk about lineup construction, what we need to do to be successful this week, and we'll build some lineups later in the video, so make sure you watch until the end. You can call me Kunith. Let's make some money this week. If you haven't already, go back and watch the video from earlier in the week where you get an idea of where I already stand. I'm going to talk about different things in this video than I did in that video. Last week we crushed. Not only was it one of the best cards of the year, but we also did pretty good on DraftKings. I know a lot of you guys did well in your contests. Again, because I think it needs to be acknowledged, shout out Natalia Silva. It always feels good when one of these sneaky underdog plays comes through, and I actually think we have a few on this card, so I want to get to them now because we don't have any changes. We still have 12 fights. We can get right into the value plays starting at 7,900. Tafon Nchukwi, he is fighting Carlos Ulberg this week. He should win this fight. There are a few reasons why I like Tafon Nchukwi in this spot. I like that he has the better experience. He's willing to grapple in his fights, and he's also shown that he can throw a lot of strikes over a 15-minute span, and he's going to need that this week. I also think that he has a good chin, and he's going to be able to eat the shots that Carlos Ulberg is throwing his way. Just because he was knocked out by Azamat Murzakanov doesn't mean he's chinny by any stretch. As I'm sure you know, if you watched that fight, he was winning up until the third round when he got caught with a flying knee, loses. We picked against him. We thought we were going to lose. Crazy times. But I'm sure with the way that that fight went, he is more motivated than ever to get back in the win column. And like we talked about earlier this week, it's going to be very simple. What Nchukwi needs to do is he needs to be first, he needs to move forward, and he needs to pressure Carlos Ulberg. If he does those things, I'm confident that he not only wins this fight, but he finds a knockout over Ulberg as well. But the issue with him and what is keeping me away from him largely this week is the pace that he showed in his last fight against Murzakanov. If he fights a similar game plan where he's very patient, looking to counter, not really doing all that much, then he's going to get picked apart. Carlos Ulberg is not going to be losing to guys in this division, at least not many of them. If they decide to have a kickboxing match with him, it's not going to happen. So this is a matter of proper game planning and execution from Tafon Nchukwi and his team. I think he wins. I hope he wins, but he's not a must play in my eyes. But of course, if he does win and he gets a knockout at 7,900, that would make him one of the better values of this week. But at the same time, he is a hard guy to trust. He's still my pick to win this fight because I think he'll do the right things. I think he'll win rounds based on bigger moments if he doesn't get the knockout. But somebody like Tafon Nchukwi, you really need to proceed with caution. Our next value play is Rodolfo Vieira. I'm sure a decent amount of you guys are going to get here because you already know if he wins, he's going to score a lot of DraftKings points. And that's because he's getting takedowns. He's likely finding a submission at some point. Chris Curtis has been taken down by lesser grapplers in the past. The issue we have with him, though, is that if he doesn't submit Chris Curtis inside the first round, I don't think he's going to make it outside of the second round. And that's because he's shown to have cardio and durability issues, and against the action man who has great hands and a much better gas tank, it's a bad matchup. So now this is where things get a little bit tricky because you have Chris Curtis, who was a big underdog against Phil Hawes. He wins, burns a lot of people who played the Hawes side on DraftKings. Comes back, does the same thing on short notice to Brendan Allen. He was a big underdog on DraftKings, burns a lot of people. You're looking at a situation where he's came up big as an underdog twice. So now the secret's out. People know Chris Curtis is coming to bang, so here's the problem. Because the secret's out, you don't get a crazy price tag on DraftKings like you did before, and now you're looking at a situation where he's going to come in at high ownership. I feel like picking Chris Curtis now, if you faded him the first 2 times around and losing money, would be like showing up to the club once they turn the lights on. You're just a little bit too late. And it's scary because I don't want to be that guy. I know you probably don't want to be that guy either, but at the same time, I do think that he probably knocks out Rodolfo Vieira this week. But the reason why he's a value play is not only because he's going to score a lot of points, but he's going to be decent leverage, and on top of that, this fight's going to be one-way traffic either way. Either Chris Curtis spins his jaw or Rodolfo Vieira comes in and gets the submission. You're going to need one side of this fight in your lineups for sure. I would recommend going with Chris Curtis, but again, I don't want to be the guy that's late to the party, but I might be. And just to add, from an intangible standpoint, I don't think Chris Curtis is scared of this guy. Granted, I don't think Chris Curtis is scared of anybody, but we know that Rodolfo Vieira does sometimes get scared to fight. He's talked about it publicly. So now you're looking at a situation where Chris Curtis knows that if he loses, it's because this guy choked him out, and that's about it. Rodolfo Vieira knows that if he loses, it's because he's getting his face punched in, and that's probably a scarier proposition to go up against, and that might cause him to make some mistakes. It might cause him to be stiff. It might cause him to be a little bit overzealous if he is able to get a takedown, like, oh, let me get this guy out of there right now. So there are a lot of things in play here. That's why I still like Chris Curtis, but I can't ignore the value here on the side of Rodolfo Vieira. Striker versus grappler matchup, we almost always take the grappler, but I think in this situation, Chris Curtis probably puts his lights out. We'll still use Rodolfo Vieira when we build lineups later on because I do think that there's decent value at the price still. Now, my next two value plays are people that are being slept on. I think this guy is being more slept on than the other guy, but this might be one of those picks that I throw out there and you're thinking,
oh, brother, this guy stinks!
The last time I felt like that about a pick, it was Jacob Malkoun, who did win that fight. That was kind of garbage, but I think this week we have a different situation on our hands with Christos Giagos at 7,200. I don't know if I have seen anybody out there pick Christos Giagos to win this fight, and I think that a lot of people are going to get burned if they go the other way. I've had people telling me left and right that he's going to lose. Stop it. Thiago Moises is not all that. I think that Giagos is one of the most live, if not the most live underdog on the slate. And he's down here at 7,200, but I think that if this line was closer, I think that if he was more expensive, if you were looking at a situation where he was around 8,000 to Thiago Moises is 8,200, I think a lot of people would find themselves on this side of the fence. But you have Thiago Moises, who is headlined a fight night card. He has wins over guys like Bobby Green, even though that really wasn't a win. He has Alex Hernandez, Michael Johnson. And even in that Michael Johnson fight, he was getting boxed up like Fortnite.
You're literally free, boxed you, dog water, 0 earns, 0 PR, you have no earnings, no wager earnings, you're free, you're literally so free, freer than a free sample at Costco, you're dog water, literally so dog.
But when you think of Thiago Moises, you think of just higher profile, higher caliber than Christos Giagos because of those experiences, because of those wins, and you just expect him to win. But not me. I won't be fooled by Thiago Moises because I know that he can't defend a takedown. I know that he's low output, and I know those two things are going to lose him this fight. I think this is a great opportunity for us to get in on the underdog here at what I expect to be a pretty low ownership. Now, Giagos is coming off that knockout loss to Arman Tsarukyan, who would give anyone in the division a tough fight, obviously, but I do like the striking output and the takedowns of Giagos to win him the first 2 rounds at least. And a guy like him with a style he has where he just kind of goes balls to the wall, you are looking at a situation where he might fade later in this fight. That's totally on the table. But even if he's gassed in the 3rd round, I don't think that Moises is going to be fresh enough or dangerous enough to find a finish late. So if he's fighting from behind, I think our money is safe with Christos Giagos. He just has to win the first 2 rounds convincingly, and I think that he'll be able to do that by landing more strikes and having some more control time on top. Sneaky value here at 7,200. And the second guy that's getting slept on this week is Mateusz Gamrot at 7,100. He's our main event underdog. This is a leverage opportunity. Initially, I picked Arman Tsarukyan to win, and I'm not saying that I think he'll for sure lose, but just think for a second. How much better is Arman Tsarukyan than Mateusz Gamrot? It's hard to say. Do you think this fight goes the distance? Probably. Has Gamrot ever been dominated in a fight? No. The only loss on his record is a split decision loss to Guram Kutateladze, who we know is extremely high level, and there are people out there that thought that he won that fight. And think back to last week with Josh Emmett and Calvin Kattar. A lot of people were on Calvin Kattar. In the contest that I was in, he was almost 70% owned, but that fight goes the distance, and Josh Emmett ends up winning at less than half of the ownership. I think we can have a similar outcome in this spot. Let's say Arman Tsarukyan comes in around 60 to 70% owned in most of your contests, and then you have Mateusz Gamrot coming in at around 25%. One of you recently said to me, we need to start taking judge volatility into consideration. And I think you're absolutely right, because let's face it, the judges sometimes don't know what they're looking at. One judge scores fighter A 3 rounds to 0. The other judge scores fighter B 2 rounds to 1. It's all over the place. And of course, judging fights is difficult. It's very subjective. Everything's moving very quickly. It's 5 whole minutes per round, so you forget a lot of what happened, which is why you see situations where a fighter's winning 4 minutes out of the 5-minute round and they give up a bad position for the last 60 seconds and end up losing the round even if there's no damage. There's a saying in boxing, take off the first minute because the judges don't remember the first minute. And those rounds are a lot shorter. So you're looking at a situation where it's not far-fetched to think that if these guys go the distance and it's a competitive fight, we might have a split decision on our hands, and that means that we have a real live shot at getting the nod from the judges down here at 7,100. When you think back to last week, we talked about why Josh Emmett was a value play. He had the power advantage, so somewhere where he was good and going to be able to keep the fight competitive, and you're just looking for leverage over the field. Gamrot is going to be able to get takedowns in this spot. He is going to keep it competitive on the feet. I don't see him getting dominated for 5 whole rounds. And the more that I look at this slate, the more that I realize we have a guy that's super talented down at this very low price. He's far too cheap this week. It doesn't matter what he scores on DraftKings. He has 5 rounds to work. He's 7,100. If he wins, he's showing up on the optimal lineup. Excellent value here on the gamer. And our last value play at 7,000 is Vanessa Demopoulos. She wins this fight. Jinh Frey is old. She's low output. She's not a finisher. I think Demopoulos is going to be the more aggressive fighter. She's going to move forward way more often, and she's going to be landing more strikes. So that aggression in close rounds could sway judges, and who knows, if she's able to come up with a submission in this spot, you're in a really good place. I just couldn't see myself playing Jinh Frey at her price, so by that logic, I will go the other way. And I won't be shocked if these value plays don't all win. Favorites could totally dominate this week, but I don't see Jinh Frey coming up with a dominant performance, so I don't care what Demopoulos scores in a win. Even if it's 65 points, that's going to be more than enough to put her in a good spot. It's Lil Monster Fight Week. Ohio, stand up. Shout out Demetrius in the comments. And with that, we can start building some lineups, but before we do, please, if you haven't already, like the video, subscribe to the channel, because if you subscribe, it's good luck, and comment something for the algorithm. It could be anything. Tell me your dog's name. I want to know. And I'll start with what I believe your cash game lineup should look like this week. I'll post the cash game lineup on Twitter because I gave some of y'all the recipe last week. It was an easy week to call, especially with Natalia Silva coming through. So I feel like I owe you one. So follow me on Twitter at Kunith MMA, which will be linked in the description, and you'll be able to see what my cash game lineup is. I'll post it a few hours before lock. If you DM me your lineup, I will respond and tell you what I think. Just let me know what contest you're in. Let me know if it's a double up, head to head, or if you're playing a tournament, what size field, how many entries, whether it's 3 max, single entry, things like that. Now this week, I think you can have a lot of success stacking the main event. Those are free squares for us there. We've got 84.50 left over per position. Well, I think that if we attack the mid-range, I really like JP Bays to get it done this week. I think this is going to be a fight where ownership is pretty split, but I think the better skill set is on the side of JP. Now we've got 85.33 left over. You know we got to go up to the top and grab our guy Umar Nurmagomedov. And now you're looking at a situation where we are back to about 8,000 per. That puts us right at Cody Durden. If you look around his price, Carlos Ulberg, Alan Baudot, you come down here to Tafon Nchukwi, Josh Parisian. I really don't like what I'm seeing. I feel like to actually make sense of this, you have to come down here and grab somebody like Vanessa Demopoulos or Christos Giagos. Let's go with Vanessa Demopoulos. So now we have 9,100 left over, so what we can do is come up here, we can grab somebody like TJ Brown, who's going to get a lot of takedowns in his fight, and you're in a good spot. This is probably the recipe for cash. If you wanted to go a different route, you wanted to come off of TJ Brown, you wanted to come off of Demopoulos, you can come down here to Sergey Morozov, who I think is the much better fighter in his matchup, and then you can come down here and you have really a lot to play with. You can grab Vieira, you can grab Brian Kelleher, who I'm not as high on, or you can come down here to Christos Giagos. Decent punt play, especially because he's going to be getting a takedown or two, at least in the beginning of this fight. And again, I'll post what the final cash game lineup is, but it probably looks something similar to that. Now, as for your tournaments, I think that one interesting way to go about this is if you come up here to Umar Nurmagomedov, you come up here and grab Shavkat Rakhmonov, well, obviously now you got to start saving some salary. Well, I think you could still come down here and grab somebody like JP Bays. You can come down here and grab Mateusz Gamrot, just hoping that you can get leverage over the field. Tsarukyan's going to come in at 65-70% ownership. Gamrot's going to come in at around around 25 to 30. You can slingshot past the competition in the last fight of the night. So now you have 79.50 left over. If you like the value plays that we talked about before, you can come down here to Christos Giagos, and now you can come all the way up here, and at this point, I'm probably choosing between Chris Curtis or Sergey Morozov. I think matchup-wise, Morozov has a better matchup, but I think in terms of that first round or second round knockout upside, you're looking at Chris Curtis. You're leaving 100 salary on the table, but you're playing Gamrot, you're playing Giagos. I think that makes you way different than the field, especially also because you're getting Nurmagomedov and Shavkat Rakhmonov stuffed into the same lineup. And you might be thinking that having both of them is a little bit too rich for your blood. You think that Neil Magny's going to be able to go the distance. Well, then take Rakhmonov out. You can come down here to somebody like TJ Brown and just leave it like this. You've left 500 salary on the table. Not many people are going to be playing this lineup. If you do want to put Rakhmonov back in there and then you come off of Chris Curtis because you think the black belt hunter could get it done, you've got 1100 salary left over. You could just leave it like this. But of course, that's hard to do when you see that much salary left over, so you might want to come off of somebody like Giagos. Now you can come up here and grab Tafon Nchukwi, but I don't feel like you're doing much to advance your position there. So let's say you went back to Giagos and instead you wanted to sweeten the deal on JP Bays a little bit, so you come up here and you want to grab somebody like Mario Bautista or TJ Brown, who I think makes more sense. This is a way that you can play it and it makes sense. Now, a lot of you probably still want to play Arman Tsarukyan, which is fine, but now you're going to have to come off of Gamrot, and at that point I would recommend that you probably play Vanessa Demopoulos. Having these three in your lineup is going to be a bit different because that would force you to play some of these cheaper options that people won't feel good about. And again, one of the biggest issues, we talk about this all the time on this channel, one of the biggest issues or biggest mistakes that people make when it comes to building their lineups is they try to be safe. They look at the underdogs down low and think, oh, well, they're not going to win. I don't think that I can play them. I need to play the safest 6 people I can. And I'm telling you now, you have never played in a contest, looked at the person in first and thought, oh, that lineup was totally obvious. In DFS and in MMA specifically, you need to expect the unexpected. You need to take some chances. You can't be safe with your lineups. And if you're new to the channel and you've been struggling with lineup construction, you're losing consistently, or you're somebody who's consistently having 5 winners in your lineups, sometimes 6, but it's hard for you to win tournaments, then you might just have a contest selection problem. So what I would recommend is go into the description. You'll see some links there. You'll see build better lineups, $100 strategy. In those videos, we talk specifically about lineup construction and bankroll management, contest selection, how to maximize the money that you're putting into DraftKings if you can't, say, make 150 lineups in the big contest. Very good resources. They are linked down in the description. If you haven't checked them out, go check them out. A lot of people have told me that that is what they base their betting around nowadays, and it's really, really helpful. Now, let's say you don't feel comfortable playing all these underdogs, which I don't blame you. I really am not all that high on Rodolfo Vieira. In this lineup, I would probably go with somebody like Tafon Nchukwi in his place, but let's say we blow it all up. Matchup-wise, I think Umar Nurmagomedov has a better matchup than Rakhmonov does, but let's say you wanted to go with Rakhmonov and you wanted to go with Arman Tsarukyan and you avoided the very highly owned Nurmagomedov. If you wanted to play a lineup that not many people are going to come with, you could come to somebody like Sergey Morozov. You can come to somebody like Baudot. You have to come here. You have to get a cheap play. You could grab Vanessa Demopoulos. So if you've built your lineup out like this, then you're looking at a situation where really all you can afford is Rodolfo Vieira, Brian Kelleher, Nuerdanbieke, or Christos Giagos. Well, if you're trying to get weird, you could go with Giagos. I mean, you really could go with any of these guys in this range here. I think Rodolfo Vieira comes in at higher ownership than these 3, so I think any of these 3 would be something weird that you can bring to the bigger contests. Or you can come off of Tsarukyan, and then you can come up here and grab Nurmagomedov. Now you haven't played anybody in the main event, so your lineup's already very different. And then you have the likes of Nuerdanbieke, Demopoulos, Baudot, Morozov. I mean, these aren't going to be the highest owned fighters on the slate, not by any stretch. And I'll quickly wrap up by giving you some lines that I think make a lot of sense when it comes to fight goes the distance. Fight goes the distance at -105 in the Brian Kelleher Mario Bautista fight makes a ton of sense. I think fight goes the distance distance in the Morozov fight makes a lot of sense. Fight goes the distance at plus 140 in the Ulberg Nchukwi fight. That is sneaky. I really like that. Fight goes the distance no at minus 190 seems like a lock in the fight with Umar Nurmagomedov and Nate Maness. And then fight goes the distance yes at minus 105. I think that makes a ton of sense in the main event. Fight parlays for the Chris Curtis Rodolfo Vieira fight. I think Chris Curtis by second round knockout at plus 450 makes a lot of sense. And then I think Rodolfo Vieira first round submission at plus 1600. I think that's his highest winning condition. I think that if you wanted to put a little bit of money on that, I don't think that's crazy. And then one more I want to show you is Umar Nurmagomedov by KO at plus 400. We talked about why we thought that could happen in the video from earlier in the week, and I think people are really going to flock to this plus 100 number on the submission prop, but I think that he finishes him with a head kick or at least ground and pound. I don't think that he goes for the submission in this fight. I wouldn't be shocked if he does, but when you look at Nurmagomedov's kicking ability, I think that he's going to catch him with one of these hook kicks and put him down. Nate Maness has been cracked many times before, and eventually that stuff catches up with you, so don't be surprised if Umar Nurmagomedov lands one of these question mark kicks and puts him down. And we'll quickly go down the card. I have Mateusz Gamrot by decision. I have Shavkat Rakhmonov inside the distance, Baudot by decision, Christos Giagos by decision, Umar Nurmagomedov inside the distance, Chris Curtis by knockout, Tafon Nchukwi by knockout, TJ Brown by decision, Sergey Morozov by decision, JP Bays inside the distance, Mario Bautista by decision, Vanessa Demopoulos by decision. If you have made it to this point in the video, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Make sure if you haven't already to like the video, subscribe to the channel. That way I could bring more of this to you.